Welcome to this week's year. We will be discussing a very interesting topic within the Parsha of the week of Sisa. Within Parsha's Sisa, as a continuation, we will of the other Parshas that we've been having is the construction of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, the wandering tabernacle within the that was traveling with the Bnei Yisrael, and that the actual building of it and the components. One component that features in this week's parsha is the Kiyar. The Kiyar is what we call the laver, and it is the place, the portion, a large copper receptacle that held water. It had a stand. It was that was made out of copper. It had some pipes coming out of it and spigots that you would turn on and off, from which the Kohanim, the priests, would wash their hands and feet before doing their services in the temple or in the mikdash, in the traveling component. In the base of Mikdash, it was a very large object which was used for the temple service. Now, what was so unique about the Kiyar was not so much of what it was or how it was used, but how the original Kiyar, how it came to being and what it was made out of. It was made out of copper, and how the copper came to the service of Hashem. In this week's portion, it talks about the commandment to actually have it. Next week's in the next week's portion, 2 weeks portion, as this week it will discuss Pasha B'Kudei. At the end of Pasha B'Kudei, it actually discusses the implementation and how it was made out of contributions from the people, from the Bnei Yisrael. And now this is the part which becomes very interesting. As we said, it was made out of copper, and the request for it was specified in this week's parsha, and I want to share that particular page of the Chumash, and then we'll read along about where it is. Okay, so you should see on the picture of the screen the original commandment. Vaidaba Hashem al Moshe lema. Hashem tells Moshe, Sisa the Kiyar necheshus. You shall make a wash stand of copper necheshus, kana necheshus, and its base should be made out of copper. What's its purpose? L'rochzo. Its purpose is for washing. The important point, keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that, right? Because the verse continues, V'nasata Esa, and it's placed very specifically, Bein Ehel Meid or Bein Mizbeach, between the tent of meeting and between the Mizbeach. That is to say that when you entered the Mikdash area or the temple area, you would see the Kiyar, the place, the washing hand, but it's not outside, but it's inside. It's inside, placed between the first altar, the outer altar, and the place of meeting, the tent of the tent of meeting. And the pasuk continues, "V'nasata shoma mayim," and you'll put water there. So let's quick look at the Rashi. Where is it located? Bein Mizbeach. Okay, so it says that this which Mizbeach? After all, there are two Mizbeach. There's the inner one, the outer one, right? So as it says, to the outside, about which is written in front of the entrance of the Mishkan, before the tent of meeting, and the wash basin, the Kiyar, was drawn away slightly, that it shouldn't block of vision from the entrance and stood opposite the space between the altar and the Mishkan, and it didn't intervene in between them, as it said. So it's there, right? And it's the area slightly to the south. Okay, we're going to now look how it was constructed and how the component part became constructed. We're going to share another screen, and we'll see over here. So the verse over here in Parshas V'Yakel says at this, and this is the point of the implementation, the doing of it. V'yas es kiyar, they made the kiyar necheshes. V'es kona necheshes, they made it out of copper. Now, how did they get the copper? Bamaris, with the mirrors, the amaris, which the mirrors the women had set up. Asher Tziboy Pesach El Moed, and they placed it at the Oil Moed. So it came as a specific contribution from women. Let's look at the Rashi, because this Rashi is very interesting. Let's see if we can make the screen a little bit larger. There we go. Right. So from the mirrors of the women who had set up the legions. So the Israelite women owned mirrors, which they would look into when they adorn themselves. So this is a mirror. The mirrors, copper mirrors, shined to a very high degree, and it came from these mirrors that the women owned. Even these mirrors, that is to say, even these mirrors, they did not hold back from bringing us a contribution, even something precious to themselves, which they did, which the women needed and needed to make themselves look attractive. They didn't stop that from bringing that as a contribution towards the Mishkan, but initially Moses rejected them because they were made for temptation, as the translation says, i.e., to inspire lustful thoughts from their husbands. Right, the Holy One Hashem said, accept these mirrors, for these are more precious to me than anything, because through them the women set up many legions. That is to say, when the Bnei Israel were in Egypt, through these mirrors, they joined with their husbands and children, and they gave birth, and through them children they gave birth to in Egypt. So, and that explains, etc., that the wives and the husbands at the time of Egypt used to look at those mirrors together, and she used to tease her husband, etc., and say, "I'm more beautiful than you." In this way, they aroused their husbands. Moshe originally understood that this is probably not an appropriate contribution to the temple. Nevertheless, Hashem said, as we said, these words that Hashem said, accept these, because they are more precious to me than anything, because through them the women set up many. Okay, so that is the portion. That's the Chumash itself. Okay, looking and understanding this further, right? And understanding potentially why Moshe Rabbeinu was uncomfortable in accepting these mirrors, because it seemed that they were used for the evil inclinations bidding. But Hashem said, no, accept them, because this is most precious, right? And from these mirrors and from these copper, the kiyar was made. For the kiyar brings peace between a husband and a wife. Now, I want to investigate this idea of that Hashem said that this is the most precious to me. Hashem is emphasizing the idea of the enhancement and the beauty and the connection between husband and wife, and that connection is a connection of positivity and holiness. sounds very admirable and very beautiful. But I want to understand a little bit more deeper. Why is this relationship so important to Hashem? How is it that this instrument of potential lustful thoughts, connection, vanity, is most precious to him? So I want to go back to the idea of Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. When we talk about the giving of the Torah, we talk about that there is a midrash which says that when we compare the relationship between Hashem and the Bnei Yisrael, between Hashem and the Jewish people, as to a relationship of a husband and wife. This relationship with God that we did at the giving of Har Sinai is the foundation on which our purpose and our mission as a Jewish people is established. Hashem has given us a constitution, laws, and in those laws we are told mitzvahs. Those mitzvahs are done with physical things, wool for tzitzis, parchment for mezuzahs, for Sefer Torah. Every mitzvah, every prayer, every part of Torah that we learn comes down to enhancing via a mitzvah our relationship of connecting with Hashem. So therefore, this microcosm, this idea of the relationship between husband and wife parallels that relationship which we have with Hashem. And therefore, this relationship of Hashem and the Jewish nation is mirrored in this relationship between a husband and wife. And therefore, when we understand this connection between husband and wife, we understand the connection between Hashem and his people. So this relationship, these mirrors, which was what brought husband and wife together, so they could produce an ongoing relationship, as well as produce families that continue the Torah in the service of Hashem. Not only are they special for Hashem, but Hashem said that they are the most precious of all. So it's so important that we imbue all the aspects of holiness that's in our lives with a connection that's embedded in the activity of the kiyur, of the laver. What was the purpose of the laver? The purpose of the laver was to wash the hands, to purify ourselves from a dirt which is hanging around with us. The idea of the kiyur, that the idea is that before we engender our relationship with the husband and wife, before we engender our connection with our Jewish people, with Hashem, we cleanse ourselves, we prepare ourselves, we can connect in a prepared way and in a holy way. And this idea of connection is like when we make a connection with Hashem, like in our prayers. Before we start our prayers, we have to get ourselves in the right frame of mood, in the right moment of prayer. We have to get into the connective point. And how do we do that? By preparing ourselves. This is the idea of washing our hands. But you might think that with that as an approach, you might think that the placement of the kiyur doesn't seem to fit. If the idea of the place of the kiyur is to make a preparation, then you would think that the placement of the kiyur shouldn't be within the temple or within the Mishkan area. It should be outside. as we do with the preparation. But in fact, we see that the kiyar was placed actually between the altar and the holies. In fact, it was in the center of all the action in the temple. And from this, we understand that there isn't just one point of connection. There isn't just one point of preparation, but that level of preparation and getting yourself into the right context of connection, that has to be in the center of all of our activity, just like it was in the center of action within the temple area and the Mishkan area. It had to be seen, and it served as a reminder of the importance of the correct preparation, as well as the importance of, in the physical case, the husband and wife relationship, and in case of the spiritual relationship, that even in our initial preparation for prayer or connection to Hashem, in whichever mitzvah we're doing, we have to have a preparation beforehand and even in the middle while we're doing it. Because we have to understand that this is a primary connection and a primary purpose of continuing our connection point to Hashem. And that means that in every activity that we do, we need a certain level of preparation, and we need a certain, as we continue that, we need to wash our hands, cleanse ourselves in that. And that's why the kiyar, which was made out of the mirrors from the women of the Bnei Yisrael and placed centrally in the temple in the Mishkan area, is a reminder that marriage and marital harmony, the connective point between Hashem and the Jewish people, is central to Judaism, and it is a foundation of Jewish life. And it is not just a special, but in fact, as we said, Hashem said that it is the most central and most important of all. And that leads us to some further ideas that we probably want to investigate. We want to look further in that idea of the temple and the preparation that we do to Hashem. In the usage of the kiyar, there are certain rules that we're required to do. For instance, in that usage of washing of the hands, we don't wash the hands at every circumstance. In fact, there's a difference between when the Kohanim were required to wash their hands when they were in the Mishkan area, or to when they were in the into the holy area. Before each activity that happened in the Mishkan area, a person had to wash his hands, and had to before he did any activity, each activity had to have its own level of preparation. As we continued, and if you did work in the inner area next to the inner altar, if there was only one initial washing, that was sufficient. Why that difference? The idea of the idea of that difference, the idea of the purpose of that of the washing itself, that whole purpose of further preparing ourselves, that is because the kiyar itself, the place of washing, at times we elevate all the things which are around us, but as we mentioned before, we need preparation. Even the things which are involved in physical aspects around the world, next to us, outside the Mishkan area, we need preparation. We need to wash our hands, cleanse ourselves out of that dirt. So any time where we're involved in something out of the outside world, we need to wash our hands before, because there might be some extraneous material still still attached to us, and therefore there's the idea of washing our hands in relationship to that. However, when we are past that, when we are past the point of elevating the physicality in everything around in the world, when we're past that point, when we are elevating areas which are not involved with physical aspects, but even more spiritual aspects. For instance, the incense prayer, which is involved, or lighting up the candles, which are in the Mishkan area, but that it was sufficient only one time washing in the day. And the idea expressed in that is that in terms of preparation of our connection, of our relationship with Hashem, when we're connecting and we're elevating the material world, as I said, we need to wash and prepare ourselves with each foray into the outside world. And when we bring it back when we bring it back into the realm of holy. So we need to prepare ourselves each time. When it comes, on the other hand, when it comes to the higher purposes, since we're on a higher level, we're attached to the inner altar, we're attached to the mission of making the Reach Necheach to Hashem, that special savor to Hashem via the Keteris, which reaches a deeper level, a higher level. The once washing of our hands is sufficient. And we look towards this idea of elevating the world and coming to the highest level, and we say that this is engendered and this is completed when we join together the husband and wife relationship within the family, and we make that a holy place for the elevation of the family. When we make that the Mikdash Ma'at, we make it the small sanctuary, and we bring our korbanos, we bring our activities to bring close. And when we have marital harmony in the house, we elevate and we emulate that harmony that Hashem made with the Jewish people at the giving of the Torah, which ultimately brings us towards the ultimate completion of our activity and our role as Jewish people, to bring the light of Hashem into the world. So I want to connect this idea to the name of the Parsha, and the name of this week's Parsha. The name of this week's Parsha is Kisisa, and the true translation of Kisisa, as you'll see in a translation, is that it's used for the count of the Jewish people. But we don't use the word for counting, like making a minion, or to count something by achieving a minion. We use the word kisisa. Sisa has got got the idea embedded in it of lifting up. So that this idea of lifting up, kisisa, when we count the Jewish people, we automatically lift them up and connect them to a higher purpose. We can Hashem, when Hashem in his commandment to Moshe Rabbeinu of Kisiso, that when you will count the Jewish people, can be translated and can be understood as when you will connect the Jewish people by virtue of counting them and bring them up higher to Hashem, we make that movement of implementing the temple and implementing all the positives that come out of the altar and the holies. And what's the preparation of that? The preparation of that is the idea of the Kiyar, the idea of the wash basin. The wash basin is the preparation to lift up. And that's why we see sometimes when people wash their hands and they lift up they lift up their hands. That is the idea of lifting up our physical activities, that our resources, which our hands, which do involve in physical activities, right? And we lift them up, and hence the Kohanim used to have to wash their hands and their feet, because all that are activities, resources which act and move us towards doing something. So the washing of the hands, the Kiyar, was instrumental in lifting up the people, and it was a preparation for the idea of the implementation of Kisisa, of when you'll implement the lifting up. This connects to the idea of the marriage and the marital harmony, which is so central to Yiddishkeit and the foundation of Jewish life. And it's after the present, the contribution of the Jewish women who didn't hold back, even from the most fundamental precious things that they had, including their mirrors, that was used for this idea of the preparation and cleaning and lifting up the Jewish nation. Okay, I wish you a good week and a good Shabbos.